Karoline Leavitt walked through the expansive, brightly lit floors of Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, her footsteps echoing as she dragged her small suitcase behind her. Despite the early morning hour, the terminal was already bustling with activity. People moved quickly through the wide spaces, their voices and the clink of rolling suitcases filling the air. Some were sipping coffee, others looking at their phones, all awaiting their flights. Caroline, dressed in a navy blue blazer, a white button-down shirt, and black pants, appeared professional but relaxed. She had long ago grown accustomed to the chaos of airports. After all, her work in politics often took her to these busy hubs. However, this morning, something felt off. As she approached the gate, she noticed a strange sensation. Several airport staff members were casting curious, suspicious glances her way. At first, she thought nothing of it. She was used to being noticed, as she was a public figure. But this felt different, more distant, more scrutinizing. Approaching the gate, Caroline noticed a woman standing behind the counter. Her name tag read Melissa J. The woman was dressed in a sharp uniform, a black pencil skirt, a fitted navy blouse, and a thin red scarf draped over her shoulder. Her appearance was immaculate, strict, professional, yet somehow intimidating. Caroline stepped forward to present her boarding pass. As she handed it over, she noticed Melissa's eyes narrow as she examined the pass. Something about the way Melissa looked at her sent a wave of unease through Caroline. "Hello," Caroline said with a friendly smile, trying to remain calm. "I'm boarding flight 237. Melissa glanced at the boarding pass but then fixed her gaze firmly on Caroline. For a long moment, they locked eyes, and it was as if the entire noise of the terminal disappeared. The silence felt strange, thick with tension. "Please wait a moment," Melissa said, holding the boarding pass tightly as she walked over to a small desk beside the gate. Caroline stood still, confused and increasingly uncomfortable. She looked around. Other passengers were having their boarding passes quickly checked and allowed to proceed. Caroline felt the weight of their eyes on her. They whispered among themselves, their curiosity growing. Among the crowd, a middle-aged man, wearing a hat and glasses, approached Caroline. "Is something wrong?" he asked quietly. Caroline shrugged slightly. "I think they're checking something." The man nodded, glancing over at Melissa before he returned to his spot in line. Meanwhile, Melissa was speaking to a younger staff member, whispering something urgently. The younger woman shot Caroline a brief look, then quickly shook her head, as if acknowledging something silently. After a few moments of uncomfortable silence, Melissa returned. Her face was as cold as ever, and she did not offer an apology for the delay. "Ms. Levitt, you'll need to go through additional security screening," she said flatly. Caroline's face immediately hardened. "What? Why?" Melissa didn't flinch. "It's standard procedure," she said, her voice emotionless. Caroline raised an eyebrow. "But why just me? Is this really necessary?" Melissa hesitated briefly, but her resolve remained unshaken. "Please step aside so you don't block other passengers." Behind Caroline, the murmurs from the waiting passengers began to grow louder. Phones were being pulled out, and Caroline could sense the growing interest in her. She glanced around, noticing the way people were looking at her, not with curiosity, but with suspicion. "No," Caroline said firmly, her voice steady and clear. "I won't move aside. I want to speak to a supervisor." Melissa's face twisted slightly with annoyance. "There's no need." "Then why aren't you letting me board?" Caroline's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Melissa gripped the tablet in her hands tightly, her knuckles white. "This is a private airline, and we reserve the right to accept or reject passengers." Caroline met Melissa's gaze, her eyes sharp. "Tell me the real reason." It was then that a middle-aged man in a dark blue jacket appeared. He had the demeanor of someone in charge, and it was clear he was a supervisor. His face bore the signs of a long day, but his presence was commanding. The supervisor, whose name tag read Mr. Adams, approached quickly. "What's going on here?" His voice was authoritative, yet calm. Melissa stepped forward, speaking in a sugary, sweet tone. Mr. Adams, we were just conducting some additional verification. Mr. Adams looked from Melissa to Karoline with a skeptical expression. Ms. Levitt, has TSA been in contact with you? Karoline shook her head. Number, this isn't about security. I'm being delayed for no reason. Mr. Adams furrowed his brow. What verification are you talking about? He asked, turning his attention back to Melissa. Melissa's face paled slightly. It's just company policy, she stammered, clearly uncomfortable under the supervisor's scrutiny. Mr. Adams took a deep breath and gave Melissa a pointed look. He seemed to understand exactly what was happening. After a moment, he turned back to Karoline. Ms. Levitt, you are free to board. There will be no additional screening, he declared firmly. Karoline shot one final icy look at Melissa, then turned and began to walk toward the gate. As she passed the waiting passengers, a few clapped, and the atmosphere shifted from tension to relief. The next day, the incident made headlines. Videos of the confrontation went viral on social media, spreading across Twitter, news outlets, and even print media. The video was shared widely, with everyone weighing in on the shocking behavior Karoline had endured. The airline quickly found itself under intense public scrutiny. People from all over the country expressed outrage, demanding accountability for what had happened. It became one of the top trending stories of the week. A week after the incident, the airline released an official statement. We have conducted an internal review of the situation, and as a result, Melissa J. has been terminated from her position. While this was a significant consequence for Melissa, the repercussions for her would go much further than just losing her job. As the weeks passed, Melissa began her search for a new position. She quickly learned that her reputation had been severely damaged. No matter how many applications she sent out, no matter how many interviews she attended, every opportunity was met with swift rejection. Her name had been blacklisted due to unprofessional conduct, and the stain on her career would prove impossible to wash away. Months later, Melissa found herself reflecting on her decisions. Sitting alone in her small apartment at night, she longed for the routine of her former job. She missed the regular hours, the camaraderie of her colleagues, and the satisfaction of serving passengers, until that fateful moment when she let her personal feelings take precedence over her duty. She pondered whether it had been worth it to delay a passenger simply because of her own biases. Would stopping Karoline from boarding, simply because she felt like it, really justify the destruction of her career? As she looked out the window at the city lights, she couldn't escape the thought, was it really worth it? Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, don't miss the next story. A new story awaits you every evening.